I'm going to tell you the story of my first pregnancy. So I'm not really sure where to start with this story. I don't do serious videos on my channel. I'm not very good at being serious. Like, honestly, I would way rather make fun of something than take it seriously and like have people bummed out or like ask me serious questions or whatever. But I do think it's important to talk about because I don't know a lot of people in my situation. And do you hear the snoring? It's my dog. It'd be kind of like interesting to know if there's people out there who have been through something similar. In 2009, I got pregnant. And it was the first time I'd ever been pregnant. And I was pretty excited. I was newly married and living in a new house in a different city, away from my immediate family. Oh, it looks like I'm crying already. It was a weird time. I slept a lot, very sick. But I started experiencing a lot of pain, specifically on my left-hand side in my ribs. I would go to the doctors and say, you know, this doesn't feel right, like something is wrong. This doesn't feel just like my body stretching, my body like trying to expand for the baby. Something feels wrong. And my doctor sort of gave me a couple options for things to do, you know, take Tylenol, rest, stretch, blah, blah, blah. Never really recommended any sort of like massage or physio or things like that, but I knew in the back of my mind that like those things would be options. And I remember one particular morning, I'd been up through the night, almost the whole night in pain, and it hurt more when I laid on the opposite side. So if I pushed or like applied pressure to the left-hand side, it gave me a little bit of relief. And I just remember I had done my best, but my hips were hurting, and I was up and down through the night, and it was just not good. And I was in tears, and I called the on-call doctor. It must have been 6 or 7 a.m. And he said, come on in, you know, as soon as you can get here, come on in. So I did. And at that appointment, I was offered medication. And a big part of me was relieved. I know that there are so many people who will definitely say that medication it's not good. Any kind of medication. And there are classes of medication, if you didn't know, that are safe to take during pregnancy. It's like, these are safe. Go ahead and take them if you need to. And then these are not ideal, but if you're in a bind, you can do this. And that's where we were. It was a Tylenol 2 with codeine that was prescribed to me. I don't remember the exact dosage, but 2 pills every 6 hours. And at the time, I trusted what my doctor said, and I felt very strongly that I needed relief. So for the next several weeks, I took the pills every 6 hours. And I just remember it kind of taking the edge off a little bit of my pain, but basically getting to a point where at about 3 hours in, I would start to shake pretty violently. I would have like tremors through my whole body, and I would be in agony again. And I didn't think it was normal, but I also didn't think that there was anything wrong with that. I just figured my pain is so intense that these pills, you know, are being used up faster or something just to cut the edge off the pain. They never knocked me out. They never made me feel, I know there's people out there who have had, Tylenol 2s or Tylenol 3s and are like, I'm loopy, I'm passed right out, they make me sleepy. And I never felt like that. I felt like they gave me a bit of numbness, but mostly I didn't feel anything. But I always held off. I always waited that 6-hour mark to take my next dose. And this went on for several weeks. Come 40 weeks, I was ready. I was so ready for this baby to come out. And I don't blame my doctor for sort of advising me to wait and asking me to wait a little bit longer. We started an induction a few days before 41 weeks, but the induction took until 41 weeks. The induction process can be lengthy. I had, I think it's Cervidil something. April 28th, 2010, my water was broken and Pitocin was started to get some contractions going and get labor started. And I labored through the night. I had an epidural. In the early hours of April 29th, 2010, I was 10 centimeters dilated and I started pushing. And I pushed for about 4 hours. All breaks, but mostly just pushing for 4 hours. And he wasn't coming. So we used forceps and he still wasn't coming. The doctors decided that we were going to have to go ahead and have a C-section. And I'm not one of those people that, was like, I had a birth plan and I didn't want this. I really just wanted my baby born in whatever way was necessary for him to be safe. And so I was open-minded. It wasn't what I wanted, but I had come to terms with the fact that we'd tried to do this the way we thought it should work and it didn't work. So we went ahead with the C-section and it was not so bad. It's a weird feeling having a C-section. You can feel the pushing and the pulling and the pressure, but you can't feel any pain. So after that, I did get to hold my tiny little baby that the doctors assumed was going to be well over 8 pounds because he was putting up such a fight to come out. Little 6-pound, 10-ounce Zachary was born. And man, oh man, did we fall in love with him. We had a lot of family come visit that day. And all day long, he didn't make a peep. He was very quiet. He didn't cry. He didn't root for food. He was really sleepy and really quiet. And being that he was my first baby, I didn't know that that wasn't normal. And in that moment, I wasn't worried. But looking back, that was definitely a red flag that there was more going on. And as the day progressed and we did eventually try to feed him, he would push away from me physically, actively trying to get away from me as I tried to breastfeed him. It was extremely discouraging. I was a new mom and I had thought I would breastfeed, but I also thought it would be something that would come naturally to both me and my child, and it didn't. The nurses reassured me we could start with bottles and we could try again later, and that seemed like a good enough plan. So at that point, again, I still wasn't overly concerned. Basically that night, he was taken to the nursery to give me some rest because I had been up all night and all day. My husband headed home and I worked on recovering from my C-section. It was not easy. I was over 24 hours that I was frozen. Into the next day, they brought him back from the nursery and they let me know that he'd had a rough night. And I just thought that was something you say, he's a new baby. Like, he's not going to be a sleeper. He's going to be a yeller. And as the day went on and I tried to take care of myself and his needs, I sort of saw what they were saying. He had a lot of resistance. He was stiff physically and just angry, really upset. Not just, oh, I pooped and I cry. Oh, I'm hungry and I cry. He resisted eating. He resisted being touched. He didn't want to be held. He was pushing away. And I know that sounds crazy because he was a newborn baby, but he was very physically resisting. And so I buzzed the nurse and I asked for a little more help. I was still struggling to move around. So they offered to take him back to the NICU again to keep an eye on him. I've heard of colic. I thought, okay, he's a colicky baby. Maybe he's got an upset stomach. I was surprised later on that day when the nurse and the doctor came in and let us know that they were going to keep him in the NICU for observation. He would not be coming back to my room where I was sleeping. He would be staying there for observation because there was just a couple more things they were not happy with. He was regurgitating a lot of his feeds. He was very angry, and sucking and swallowing just didn't seem to be coming together. So then began the questions of, how early is he? And I'm like, he's not early. He's 41 weeks. Okay. Any medications during pregnancy? Well, yeah, here are the medications I was prescribed. And everybody sort of shrugged and said, it's not great, but it shouldn't be causing all these problems. So everyone was pretty well in agreement that it didn't seem like a big indicator for the kinds of things we had started to see. And as the days went on, we got to about 3-4 days, and I was discharged, and I did have to leave my baby at the hospital, my very first baby, and it was incredibly difficult. I remember I called my mom in the morning that I was supposed to leave, just sobbing, crying, saying, come get me right now. If I have to leave him, I want to do it sooner rather than later. I can't wait 12 hours to say goodbye to him and have to leave him here. I just want to go. And that breaks my heart when I think about it now, because it was going to be so hard to be away from him. I remember being in the room and getting up in the middle of the night. It was a shared room. And a lady got wheeled in about 2 or 3 in the morning to be put in my room with her new baby. And she wanted the lights on and she wanted to stare at this beautiful little person. And I remember this feeling so strongly that I was awake and without my baby. And, 3 days postpartum, and I remember thinking, I was where you were 3 days ago. That elation, that feeling that everything is perfect, and I was now at a place where nothing was perfect. Everything was horrible, and I hated her. I hated her in that moment. I went home with my husband and I cried in the shower. It was so nice to have a real shower, but I missed my baby and I was in pain. And I made the trip daily. We were about an hour away by drive from the hospital where my son was delivered. And it was about that time that social workers got involved in our situation. I don't know if that's really, really typical or something that was unique to our situation, but Zach saw a different pediatrician almost every day, depending on who was on duty at the time. And I got asked the same question almost every day. What about medications? Were you a recreational drug user? And I was always extremely honest and let them know the things I'd been prescribed, the things I took. I was really honest about the fact that I drank Coca-Cola and I ate deli meat. And what else do you want to know? Because I will tell you anything if you can just tell me what's going on with my baby. And I remember one doctor said to me specifically, do you want your mother to leave the room and we can ask you again? And I was like, if you want her to leave, absolutely she can leave the room and I will answer anything, but my answer is going to be the same. And eventually we figured out that Zach was diagnosed with neonatal abstinence syndrome, which basically is withdrawal. And that his reaction, as far as the nurses and doctors were concerned, was likened to as if I had been a recreational heroin user. And that is why the social workers were involved, and that is why I was questioned so many times about what else I might have done while I was pregnant with him. And I felt confident, as did my doctor, that there was nothing else to look at, that these were the only things I had done. Taking this prescription medication that my doctor recommended. Eventually it was determined my rib had actually fractured while my son had been in utero. Me and Zach both do not metabolize codeine correctly, that my body does not use codeine the way that it should. And as a result, they had to put him on morphine and slowly wean him down off that morphine. The withdrawal affected the muscles in his mouth and throat, so that eating was a challenge. They originally told us 3 to 6 days is roughly the amount of time that should be required for the level they were seeing with him of withdrawal symptoms. We must have tried 4 times to wean him off of the morphine, and each time the doctors insisted that we would have to start over and we would have to go back to the original dose and go slower. So what started as a 3-day adventure eventually wound up in him staying in the hospital for 3 weeks in the NICU, and it was very surreal. He was at this point, right around 7 pounds, biggest baby in the NICU, and people didn't really understand why he was still there. Eventually, we were given morphine to come home with, and I don't know if the hesitation came from them possibly thinking I was a heroin user, but eventually we were offered to give him his medications at home and get him sort of fully weaned off that way. We were followed closely by a pediatrician and given instructions for how and when to administer and how slow to reduce the dosages. And I spent my first Mother's Day without my baby. He was in the NICU for my very first Mother's Day, and that was very difficult. And at that time, I didn't see a lot of bright spots. I sort of felt like life was always going to be like that. It was always going to be this medical hardship, someone else saying, your baby needs to be here more than he needs you. And that was hard to hear as a new mom, which ultimately did put me into some postpartum depression that thankfully I was able to get treatment for and some help with once it really hit home that that's what I was also dealing with. During that time, I was not really able to eat more than a couple mouthfuls at a time. It almost felt like everything I did was a waste of time. If I wasn't with him, I was wasting my time. And I wound up losing a bunch of weight, which in retrospect was obviously not super healthy, but damn, I looked good. And I didn't sleep very well. I did miss him very much. It did take several months for him to really be weaned off of it completely. And now we are approaching his 9th birthday. We love him to bits. He is every bit his very own person. And I have more of his story to tell, but I'll save it for another video. So if you've watched all this, thank you for watching. Please consider liking. Oh my God, stop begging. Blech. Please like and subscribe if this video was at all interesting to you or helpful to you, or you related to any of it at all. Liking this video lets me know that this is more the kind of thing you want to see me do. I swear I am way better at being funny than being serious. This was just sad. I enjoyed being able to share this with you, and I do hope that it sheds a little light for you into my family life and into my past and into kind of some of the things I deal with all the time. And you can go ahead and say whatever you want in the comments. Basically, you can't guilt me any more than I've already guilted myself. This has been Jossie Potts saying I love you all.